evening.
Right.
Don't get too relaxed now.
No.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ruth Wishart. It's my very great pleasure to be chairing this evening's event. And I'm guessing you may have foregathered because you wanted to hear from that rare Scottish breeder, Rugby International, who was in a Calcutta Cup winning side. For Scotland, that is. You may have thought that his major claim to fame in more recent years was commentating on Rugby World Cups, Six Nations matches, and other clashes of the Rugby Titans. But perhaps you'd be curious to know too how, like the late, great Bill McLaren, he contrives to describe internationals between Scotland and the old enemy with an apparent level of detachment. You can see that that doesn't extend to me. But these gigs, my dears, have been merely filling the gaps between spending a week with Liz Taylor, playing some golf with Arnold Palmer, sharing a glass or five with Richard Harris and Peter O'Toole, and a studio with Oliver Reed, whilst the latter never knowingly deleted an expletive. And we mustn't forget, in this wonderful book, this memoir of Ian's, we mustn't forget some memorable interviews with the legendary Nelson Mandela. He's much sought after on the after-dinner circuit, where much of his time is spent raising a great deal of money for a great deal of good causes. On that front, he's wont to quote another great man, Muhammad Ali, who suggested that service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Of course, it hasn't all been plain sailing. He did spend a term at Fettes in this very city, attempting to teach a Mr. Anthony Blair. That went well. And of course, he's not a stranger to the interior of betting shops, whose owners, as we know, are notoriously averse to charitable giving. So please welcome one of the UK's most celebrated broadcasters, Ian Robertson.
Thank you.
I think we should probably start, Ian, with you telling us how this broadcasting lark all got going.
Yes, I left Watson's, was my school. I went to Aberdeen University, and in my final year, there was a great guy, a lot of you will remember, because I'm looking at the age group here, was KJF Scotland, Ken Scotland, and he was one of the great Scottish rugby players, played for the Lions tour, he went on, and I babysat for him, and that gave me money to buy pints of beer once every week. And in the summer term had just begun, and he said, would you like to do a postgraduate degree at Cambridge University? So I laughed my head off. I could barely read and write. And I said, look, I've scraped through Aberdeen and I'm coming out with some sort of a degree. No, he said, we have a nice man there where I went to, and his name's Dr. Pratt, and he's very sympathetic to rugby players. Right, okay. So 4 weeks later, I got on a bus, a coach from Aberdeen to Edinburgh, changed there, got another coach down to Victoria, changed there, and got a coach through to Cambridge for my interview at 9:30 in the morning. So we'd gone right through the night. And I got there, and there was a secretary where I was told to go, and I said, I'm here to see Dr. Pratt. Said, right, what time? Yes. Oh, you're very early. Go to the buttery across there and come back in half an hour just before you're due to go in. So I did, and I went there. She'd gone at this point, so I walked, the buzzer went, I walked in, and I saw this man behind a lovely oak desk. And he said, wonderful, wonderful man, Dr. Pratt. Inspirational teacher, intellectual giant, but a great sports fan and a man of the people. He'll be sorely missed. He already was being sorely missed. I said, he's passed away. So sad, and I'm so sorry you've had a wasted journey. I do apologize, but there's nothing I can do. So I said, well, I feel very sorry for him and his family, I understand. As I walked out, I closed the door, and she was just coming back. What? You've only been in 30 seconds. What happened? I said, well, you didn't tell me that Dr. Pratt had died. He hasn't used that for about 20 years, that line. just go back in. Well, I went back in. And he'd gone, and we were on the 3rd floor, and the windows were all closed. And I couldn't see, but the desk had a mahogany front, so I couldn't see. But 2 hands appeared behind, and he threw a rugby ball, and this is God's honour. I caught it there. I'm right-footed. Left-footed, I drop-kicked it. It just got over the near side of his table, comfortably over the far side, and went straight into the wastepaper basket that exactly fitted the ball. He got up, ran round, hugged me and said, "You're in!" I moved from Cambridge to Fettes, and while I was, again, not too difficult interview, Dr. McIntosh, the headmaster, came to London, offered me the job. I accepted, so that was no grilling there. And then, 3.5 years later, Cliff Morgan, one of the greatest rugby players of all time, came up, took me for lunch and said, "I'm switching from radio that I've been doing the commentaries on to television to work with Bill McLaren for the next 20 years. Would you like my job?" "Yes, please." So that was the 3rd interview. And having got in 1972, 1974 was one of the great years for me, and those of a certain age will know it's the only ever Unbeaten Lions tour. They started in 1888. They've come through only one team, and they were called the Invincibles. Willie John McBride was the captain, and he was there in South Africa. Cliff Morgan was doing all the commentaries. They won every match up to the first test. They won the first test and the second test, and it was suddenly looking as if this could be the first ever winning team with a 100% record. And I was sent out clutching my little microphone and my little tape recorder, only 2 years in the job, and Cliff Morgan collected me from the airport and said, "Right, you're here, we've got a big match this week, but let's go straight to dinner." It was 7 o'clock at night. And I said, "What's been the best match so far?" He said, "Well, we've had a lot of great matches. Rhodesia, that was at Salisbury, that was a good game. We won very comfortably, 30-odd points, and we went back to the hotel, Meikle's Hotel in the middle of Salisbury, now it's Harare, and he said, we celebrated at 5 o'clock and we had a few beers, and at 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, and we had a few more beers at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock. Some of us were struggling to stand, but in the center of Meikle's Hotel, they had 2 of the most famous chandeliers in the world. They'd cost $1 million. They were absolutely sensational. And our guy said, if we put that table on that table, and we get our tallest second row to put the scrum half up and see if he can swing on them. And he did. But unfortunately pulled it down, and it crashed horrendously, and they did the same with the other one. They had a piano, and they have a sing-song. Cliff Morgan was a brilliant pianist and could just play by ear, and so they're having the sing-song. They went up to the 12th floor, got the piano, into the lift. Unfortunately, there was no lift there, so it went down. It went down 12 floors, and the people who were there said they'll never forget the noise it made as it just exploded. And then they put a double bed out of a balcony from the 14th floor into the swimming pool. Now, at this point, the manager of the hotel got a bit irate. And he went and banged at midnight on Willie John McBride's door. And Willie John had just retired. He was in his underpants and puffing his pipe. And it just shows what a genius he was as a captain, because he diffused what was a very dangerous situation with just 6 words. Because the manager said, I can take no more of this. It's a disgrace. You have wrecked my hotel. 2 chandeliers, world famous, in tatters. And then a piano down a lift shaft. I can take no more. I'm calling the police. And Willie went, will there be many of them? manager said, "That's very good. Will you help me put my hotel what's left back to..." Yes, and they stayed up for 5 hours and they tried their best. They couldn't do much with the chandeliers. Then, with Willie John, they had won every game, but there was trouble in Bloemfontein. Has anybody ever been or heard of Bloemfontein? It's a wild Afrikaans holding, and everybody there is 6 foot tall and 6 foot wide. They then put a head on top of that. They don't put anything into the head. They just put it on. And their orders from their captain were to kick and stand and punch and injure as many Lions players as they possibly could. So then, for the first test, then the South Africans would win. So they injured 7 players. Now, you would have thought, but what about the referee? That tour played 22, won 21, drew 1, was refereed by 22 South Africans. There were no neutral referees. It's the local referees at that time in 1974. And when asked, "Why aren't you sending him off?" he said, "I've got to live here." Which was fair enough. And the players were taken off, and at that point, the Lions were replacements were allowed, but it was they won, and they were so much better than Orange Free State, but they won not that well, but they won. And then in the evening, when all the players had come back from the hospital, 2 had to return to Britain. It was really a terrible day. And Willie John McBride said, "I have a plan. If anybody hits one of our players, I will have a code, and it's 99. If I call 99, you all hit the nearest bugger to you." They don't know the code, so it should be easy. And they went down to play in Port Elizabeth against the local team there, and it had gone well. But after 20 minutes, suddenly the Port Elizabeth, they attacked Eastern Province. And immediately 99, and 5 of them were sound asleep. He said also, "They can't send us all off." It'd be the end of the tour. And they're there. And from full back, JPL Williams sprinted 50 yards and chinned Flip van der Merwe, and he went to sleep. And Phil Bennett, my size, he ran 60 meters straight across the pitch, and with the back of his hand shouting, "Take that!" he hit as hard as he could on the back of the head a 9-year-old ball boy. Yes! And there was no, that's more or less the story, but there was no more trouble again. The code was only heard once more when I'd gone out with the 12 of the Lions, and we were on a beach in Durban on a Thursday lunchtime, and the queue was getting closer and closer to the front. And at the very front, we were about 6 behind. A guy at the very front said, "Hey, I don't know what you call it, but I want a cone. Into the cone you put an ice cream, and into the ice cream you put a chocolate flake. What is that called?" "Ach man, everybody knows that. It's a 99. Carnage on the beach everywhere. Old age pensioners knocked over. Good fun, Lions tours.
I'm really, really thrilled that you told that story, because especially the night that we've got a Bloemfontein bus party, and it's just...
Well, that's all right. They wouldn't understand. I was speaking quickly. They wouldn't have picked up a word of it.
I don't want you to get serious for a moment, because this is all just lovely stuff, but I do want to ask you about the late, great Bill McLaren, because I know he was a particular mentor of yours, Ian, and you must have some special memories of him.
He started when I was teaching at Fetty's. I was taken along to a couple of matches. I was playing then, but 1970 was my last cap. Well, it was against Australia, but I played the Calcutta Cup. We won that year. And he was great, because when I'd done my knee in, he said, come along and you can be the summarizer for me. And so I learned and I watched, and he had these fantastic notes, 1,200 statistics. And we did 3 World Cup finals together, 91, 95, and 99. And he was a million times a better commentator than me. So I said, you've got to do the last 20 minutes of each match. He said, absolutely not. You're the correspondent. And so he was very happy just to do the first 20 minutes each time, talked through it all, and he then had these fantastic notes. Where are your notes, son? I took him out of my pocket. What's that? And I'd written down, we were doing an Ireland game. I put Ireland in green, Scotland in navy brackets, probably. You're a joker, you are, son. Threw it away, and he got 1,200 statistics. He said, you see, if a player's injured, I could talk for 10 minutes about every single player. I said, and Bill, if a player's injured, I could talk for 10 minutes. Not about the player, but I could talk. So he was, and we just got on really, really, really well.
Yeah. He was the man.
He spent his life saying a day out of hog is a day wasted, and I had to explain it was the other way round. That was the only argument we ever had.
Were you there in the era of his Hoyt balls?
Oh yes, they're spicy. Yes, he gave them to everybody. He was a great man, and he was just devoted to the game. His whole life was the game, and he was just the greatest commentator ever. I mean, we did a tribute to him, and we had I got along Sir Peter O'Sullivan, Murray Walker, Richie Benno came, and he brought his sheets along to be auctioned, and John Motson, who thought he was the hardest worker, who prepared all his ad-lib lines for a whole season of hundreds of ad-lib lines. Oh, that'll be a good one if that comes. and then he saw Bill's notes and he said, I thought I was professional. This is unbelievable. He was just so devoted to it, had a great voice and a great way with words.
I want to take you back to one of the things that I flagged up in the short introduction, Ian. It was a day, perhaps wasn't your greatest broadcasting hour, because you were joined in the commentary box by Mr. Oliver Reed.
Oh. Are there anybody here under 18? I probably shouldn't, so you'll work out what X stands.
Just go for it.
I was being sent along for my first commentary. It was Rosalind Park against Coventry at Roehampton, and I got there, and they said, look, you're doing the commentary, and you'll be on, it was Radio 2 then, Sport on 2, and we're not interested in you, said the head of sport very kindly. They said, we just don't care anything about you. You just keep bringing in our very special guest. Ooh, I said, right, who is it? We'll tell you on the day. So I got to the ground. I had a little engineer with me, and we managed to get all the equipment. But approaching 3 o'clock, there was nobody there. And they said, well, it's Oliver Reed. Is he not there yet? No, not that I can see. And I started and did a bit of commentary. Then they pulled away to give a horse race result. And they said, is he there? No, he's not. And then I did a bit more commentary. And then I saw him. And I thought, this is going to be a very important moment in my life. I've been told they're not the slightest bit interested in my commentary, but bring on Oliver Reed as fast and as many times as you can throughout the match. He'd just done his famous Russian one, and he was the biggest name in the film industry. But he was pissed out of his brain. And he swayed onto the pitch and fell over, and they picked him up. He came back, went into the fence and fell back, and they picked him up. And I'm thinking, my career's hanging on this. And then he came up and gave me a huge kiss with his tongue, and just it was just hot. He was absolutely gutted. They could see him though, and it's 20 minutes into the game, and they said, put him on immediately or you're sacked. I thought, right, difficult choice. So I said, well, with me is the great actor who's just been Oscar nominated for 2 films, Oliver Reed, who bought the floodlights, the first floodlights for any rugby club in the United Kingdom, a long-time supporter of Roslyn Park, and they're doing remarkably well here because most people thought the Coventry pack would be too good. And he said, rubbish! I'll try and get this out. He said, we've got a munging good pack, and the fucking good pack who'll rip them to shreds, and we'll win this fucking game. Everything cut. Bit of music came up, and we didn't appear again. And that was it. He had a wonderful, solid mink coat that had cost £50,000. And he had mud all over where he'd fallen. It was very sad. And then he said, afterwards, we'll go drinking. I said, no, I won't.
You actually, I mean, you have kept some comparatively dodgy company in... Well, actually, lots of dodgy company, but the two I was thinking of were Peter O'Toole and Richard Harris, who were both rugby fans.
Yes, they weren't teetotal.
No.
No.
You noticed?
No, they came to every Ireland-England match, and they were great fun. And of course, the third rogue was Richard Burton, and I ghosted a book.
Yes, we'll come to Richard.
Come to that, yes.
Because it's really Richard's missus I want to come to.
Yes, they were very good. I spent 3 hours getting material from Peter O'Toole, but I realized I wasn't going to remember any of it because he would open my mouth and just kept pouring alcohol down, and it went on and on and on. And
something tells me you didn't struggle too much.
No, I did, because he had to put me in a taxi and send me home, and I couldn't remember where I lived. So he had to make a phone call to find out. And I recovered in about 3 weeks, but it was frightening. And then we went out together with Richard Harris, who was a great guy, lived in the Barnes area. And we all met up there, and they all told me wonderful stories about Richard Burton, and some were printable.
Yes. Well, we better just come on to that now then, because in the course of... Richard Burton, as we know, died, but that you had a lot of material, and you also had access to a lot of evidence about his life and times and anecdotage, among which was Elizabeth Taylor. And not every sports commentator has the opportunity to spend a week in Hollywood with Elizabeth Taylor, but this is the man who did.
Yeah, I stayed sober, and I can remember. She was absolutely brilliant, because the publishers wanted to have her to write a foreword about it, and she'd never written anything for any paper, magazine, book from the day he died in 1984, and this was 3 years later, 1987. And she wrote a lovely foreword. I got as far as New York with the brother and sister of Richard Burton. Richard was the 13th child of a drunken Welsh miner and a washerwoman who had a skiffle board and took in washing. And he went to school locally, but there was a guy there, a famous guy, Philip Burton, who was a BBC producer in Wales. And he went to look at a school where they said, there's this brilliant child who's acting. Will you come and see him in the play? And he went along, saw it, and at the end of the play he said, there was a brilliant child there, but it wasn't your guy. It was this guy. I want to meet him and his father. And it was Richard Burton. The only reason he was in the play was they were going to go to Paris to play to a French school that wanted to play in English. And he thought, I'll get to Paris. He thought he was a bit of a live wire, Richard, and liked the good life. And I knew him because he was a rugby nut. He wore something red every single day of his life to support Wales. It would be a handkerchief, socks, whatever. And he was just an absolute devoted rugby nut.
Among all the other attributes you've got, you're a master of understatement. Richard Burton, a bit of a live wire.
Yes. And it was great. I got a wonderful story of them. There was the family went two of the Burtons. There were, I say, 13, and Graham was the last. His name was Jenkins. He was Richard Jenkins. But this Philip Burton said, I will look after him, I'll get him castings, I'll make him a famous actor. In return, I'll give you 200 guineas if you change his name by deed poll from Jenkins to Burton. So that's how we became Richard Burton. And that was the story. And yes, so Elizabeth treated us very well. And
Really?
I got a Christmas card from him every year. That kept my wife on her toes. Yeah. And she had 4 little sausage dogs, and would always send a photo of them, and I'd got a big fat Rottweiler, and I said, I've shown them the photo, you could eat them all at once, I said. Yeah.
There's lots and lots and lots of stuff about, which we'll come on to, I hope, if we've got time, about golf and everything else, but I think really given this book and given this audience, we ought to talk a bit about rugby at least.
All right.
Jim Telfer and Ian McGeechan, both loomed large in your life. Fit like. What kind of men were they?
I got on better with Ian McGeechan. I wasn't very brave, and Jim Telfer liked people to go around smashing people down and tackling them, whereas I would say, oh, I'm sorry I'm in your way, on you go. And really it was the back rows were meant to do the tackling in those days. One pair of shorts lasted me the whole season, and Jim Telfer didn't like that. But to my great pleasure, we played in Buenos Aires against Argentina, and they had a massive centre called Alessandro Travaglini, who was 6'4" and 17 stones, and he was running. But it was all right. I realized I was going to go to that side and kick off that way, and he could go straight past. And I did it, but he changed. And I just remember closing my eyes, doing that, and scared out of my wits. And he crashed to the ground 6 inches short of the try line. And Telfer ran past. Great tackle! Bloody hell, it's you! I took the grass out of my mouth. I know! I said. Yeah, it was but he was a great man. He was a great captain and a great coach.
Must have been, I mean, you got these caps for Scotland. You did, as I said at the beginning, feature in a cup-winning team. But, I mean, you were only 25 when your career was... That must have been pretty tough to cope with.
Yes, I did both knees and cruciate ligaments, and in those days, that was it. Now they sew them up and do wonderful jobs, but that was the end of it. But it had a happy ending because I then had to retire, and then Cliff Morgan came up, and I got 47 years of fun as a reward.
And kept your nice pristine shorts.
And still got the same pair of white shorts.
Let's talk a bit about the contemporary Scots teams. We talked a wee bit before we come on about who you fancied in the Scottish international team. You're quite... and in the book too, quite flattering about, well, hardly flattering because they're good, about Stuart Hogg and Finn Russell. And I mean, who do you rate in the contemporary Scottish team?
Well, most of them. There's the best squad we've had, I would think, in 15 years, 20 years. It's if 4 are injured, we've got another 4. Whereas in the past, England, if they have 25 players injured, they bring in the next 25. They've got 1.5 million playing rugby there. I think over the age of 18 here, we're probably around, maybe not even 20,000.
One of the things that always concerned me about that was that there's so, comparatively speaking, so few schools, almost all fee-paying schools that play rugby, and grassroots rugby presumably is only going to have these kind of numbers if schools, state schools, all kinds of schools have rugby teams. Why have they been so resistant to taking up rugby?
I think that the young age that they play mini rugby and get an interest in it, and I think that it's much better now than it was 20 years ago and 30 years ago, that the kids love it. It's non-physical for the ages sort of 5, 6, 7, and there's mini rugby all over Britain, and Scotland have their fair share. We don't have the numbers. I mean, Wales and Ireland, they're all around 4 million, roughly, people, and England have got 64
So how do we fix it?
We make it a really good game that the team spirit and the coaches, and they do a very, very good job. And Scotland now have the strongest squad I think they've had in 20 years, because we can cope with a few injuries now. And Townsend, Greg is doing a great job.
But what we can't stop, it seems, is losing our best players to go and play elsewhere.
I think that's so sad that we should have a whip round here today and see if we can raise a couple of £1 million. It's so sad that somebody like Stuart Hogg has gone off to play in Exeter, and Finn Russell's in Paris.
And both of them are very rich young men now.
They'll be on the best part of £1 million. And there's a lot of France in particular. It's very, very difficult, but Scotland have got to rise to the occasion. I think we were about 28 million in debt nearly 20 years ago, and we've chopped that back. BT Sport sponsorship has been phenomenal. It virtually goes in to pay off the debt. And now our debt is minimal. It's something like 4 million, but we could pay that off. Now is the time to keep BT Sport on. They're not paying as much as they were, but now we should be able, in the next 4 years, to have a kitty that we can pay what they're getting in clubs like Exeter.
Keep them down in the farm.
Yes, because it's so sad that the top players disappear.
Now, I'm wanting to open up the audience in a minute, but what a lot of people might not know is, as well as being a consummate rugby commentator, you were also a horse racing commentator, and indeed deeply fond of horse racing as a sport, and indeed not a stranger to bookmaking establishments.
No, correct. As a student at Aberdeen, I went down to get a summer job in the end of my first year, and there was a 2-month settler of accounts job in Ladbrokes in Sauchiehall Street. So I went in there and said I'd like to apply for the job. And the guy said, okay, son, let's fill this in. Let's see what you're doing. Oh, you're a student, Jesus. And there was one other guy who was called Cedric Irving Fortescue with a hyphen. I know, you're right, he was English. So you'll each get a question. Whoever gets the answer to the question right first gets the job. I was asked, what would you pay a £1 bet on a 5-to-1 winner? Now, while I was working that out, Cedric was asked, what would you pay after betting tax of 9% on a bet of 87 pence each way on a 13-to-8 on favourite, which dead heats for 4th place in a 16-runner handicap. A dead heat, you lose half the stake when the second favourite at 4-to-1 is withdrawn, not under starters' orders. Rule 4 applies, deduction 35 pence in the pound, and I beat him by nearly 2 seconds.
And you're also a betting man, not just in the GGs, but I mean, I was digging you up a bit earlier on today when we were talking about one of the pieces of commentary of which you're most proud and which most people remember, and it's the World Cup, and Johnny Wilkinson's got a drop goal to secure the World Cup for England.
Yes.
Now just
Yes,
talk us
that
through
was good. I was 2 weeks ago at Jed Forest. They had 700 people in a big marquee for the 3 nines, celebrating the 3 scrum halves who were number 9. It was Roy Laidlaw, his nephew Greg Laidlaw, and Gary Armstrong. And I was there to do the half-hour speech. And Johnny Wilkinson was there. I mean, that was a miracle. He never goes anywhere. He's shy. But Gary Armstrong said, I coached you for 18, 19, and 20 years of age. I was your scrum half. Johnny said, I'll come. And he did, and he spoke really, really, really well. But I took a bit of a bashing immediately after that, because my fellow Scots were a little disappointed that, I came up for a Watsonian dinner, and they were really aggressive. I said, all right, just sit down, I'll stand up and I'll tell you the story, then make your decision. And I said that I met Lawrence Delalio and Jason Leonard, who are best friends. They're 2 great guys. And 18 months before the World Cup, 2003, we had a dinner. We went through the 5 or 6 major teams and worked out that England were at, one bookie had them at 20-1. they'd lost 2 or 3 games, but Delalio said, in another 12 months, we will have all this, and the backup. So for the World Cup, we should be 8-1 third favourites, and they got us at 20-1. And we had the whole meal, and then we went off in our separate ways home. The morning at 10 o'clock when Ladbrokes opened, I picked up the phone. Said, what are the odds for the Rugby World Cup? And to cut the story short, I begged, and I got from the 20-1, I got to 40-1, saying, I just want a small bet, and come on. And I'll make you famous. I'll be up at a big show in Scotland, and I'll be telling people what a wonderful group Ladbrokes are. So I got the 40-1, and he said, how much do you want on? I said, £100. He said, just a moment, sir. He went to his little computer. Mr. Robertson, you've been with us for 21 years. Your biggest ever bet has been £5 each way on a 4-1 shot, second favourite in an 8-runner race. What you thought? I said, you don't think I've got 19 friends? We all want a fiver on it. So I got the fiver on it, and then the moment of truth came. There's 35 seconds to go as there's a big ruck and the ball comes back, and my commentary went, there's 35 seconds to go. The ball comes back to Johnny Wilkinson. He drops for World Cup glory. It's high, it's straight, it's over. And there's no time for Australia to come back. England have just won the World Cup, and I've won £4,000. Yes, yes, yes.
And that was your plea in mitigation, basically.
Yeah, I think so. Was that fair? I mean, of course I sounded a little bit excited. I tell you what I have done. You very kindly said, like Bill McLaren, I was totally unbiased. I was, but I got pulled up by the Director General to go in front of a little tribunal committee for England against Wales at Wembley, an unlikely venue, but at Wembley, because it was a home match for Wales. They were rebuilding the Millennium Stadium, and they chose for their home match Wembley. And we're there, and I'm doing the commentary, England against Wales. And it's the Five Nations. It was the very last match in the Five Nations. And with, I think, 8 minutes to go, England were leading by 6 points, so a try and a conversion is 7. They've a kick in front of the posts on the 22-metre line. Delalio, the captain, kicked to the corner, will score a try. They kicked to the corner, they lost the line out, kicked back downfield. They came back again now with 2.5 minutes of the match to go. Another penalty in front of the post. I won't kick there, we'll kick to this touchline. And the players were saying, no, give it to Johnny, give it to no. So they were penalised. The kick went to the halfway line. The Welsh, their throw in, they won the ball. They drove on past the 10-metre line. The ball came back, and my commentary, and is this biased or not? The ball came back, and I said, it comes back to Scott Gibbs. He smashes between the two England centres. He's up and over past the full-back. He's going for the line. He gets there. He scores the try. That with the conversion means Scotland will be the Five Nations champions. Wait. Will be the Five Nations champions this year, next year, and every year forevermore. That was simply stating 4 facts. I got off.
I think that was your finest hour. We're going to have the lights up, please, because I'm sure there's lots of questions. And I have to say, I don't know how much time we've got left, but when you get this book in the signing tent, it's full of fabulous anecdotes like that. And I'm a bit of a rugby fan, and it's just been a joy reading it, and you will find it a joy as well. But anyway, let's have some questions. There we are. Thank you.
It's very simple. Who should I put my money on to win the World Cup?
It's not been a good couple of months for me. Foolhardy, I thought that I'd have a little tickle 18 months ago and stuck 50 quid, which is a huge bet for me. And I put it on Ireland. And since when they haven't won a game, but they up to that point they were going brilliantly. So New Zealand are favourites, but I really think this time that they are not that much better than 3 or 4 other teams. The England-Wales match, I didn't see it today, but I see Wales won. England, I don't think are a strong side. They're likely to meet New Zealand in the semi-finals, and they won't beat New Zealand. Wales would have a chance, and I think Ireland will come back. Joe Schmidt's, I think, the best coach in the 4 home unions. Gregor's right up there, and South Africa, I think, will be the outside bet because they've got a. It's not great in rugby or in any sport to have. You've got to pick so many. I think it's now 10 black and coloured South Africans, but they've found a lot of really good players. Scrum half's fabulous. The coach is excellent. So I think South Africa will get to the semis. New Zealand will get to the semis. And I think Wales might, and I hope Ireland might.
Could you, as you're talking about semis of a World Cup, could we just wind the tape back just very briefly to the semi-final of the World Cup, the last World Cup, where Scotland were almost within touching distance?
Oh, that was, yes, the referee.
Mr. Joubert.
Yes, that was just appalling. He is a very good referee, but he lost it. And then he blew the whistle early when he was near the halfway line and sprinted off down the tunnel. And Gavin Hastings was my summariser, and we didn't half give it to him then. We said, absolute disgrace. The referee should always shake both captains' hands. He shouldn't be trying to do the 100 yards in 10 seconds. And it was an absolute disgrace, and he got it completely wrong. And then I'm friendly with the president of World Rugby, Bill Beaumont. I wrote his autobiography for him, and I had a word with him, and they announced that they completely agreed that it was entirely the referee's fault. He made an absolute hash of it, and they relieved him of his duties for 12 months. So I felt there was some honour left. But it was so unlucky.
I don't see Mr.
And also, if that, for those who saw that it was the very end of the game, but that Stuart Hogg had the ball because they kicked into our just about to the 22, and the fullback, Stuart Hogg, got it. He rooted it up in the air, and it landed inside their 22. And a good 10 seconds after he kicked it, the wing Mitchell smashed him into touch into the billboards. And when we saw the replay, it should have been a penalty where the ball landed 50 metres up, and that would have ended the game. So, and the referee ignored it. So, no, we didn't like the referee.
Let's have some more questions. Yes, there's somebody in the middle there. Thank you. There's a mic coming here. Isn't this interesting? I'm usually going to bully women into asking questions here, and here we are talking about rugby, and it's all women asking questions. Go for it.
Okay. I just wanted to say, you think it's very sad that somebody like Stuart Hogg goes to Exeter and Finn Russell goes to France. Do you not think it's quite good for some of our young players who've known nothing else but Scottish rugby to go other places, other countries, and get the experience there and bring it back to Scotland?
Yes, but they're not the young players, are they? They've reached the mid-20s and on. You can argue that, but England don't, and New Zealand don't. They pick, you play or you don't get picked if you're not actually playing there. And of course, it's an argument. For the younger players in their sort of 21, 22 to go and have a season in New Zealand would be very good. But I think it's sad that England have the Bank of England there, so they make sure all their players play in England. And what happens if they go off? The Racing won't let Finn come back when there are training sessions they have to play the week before an international. That's not good. And the same Exeter, that Exeter have Stuart, and they'll play him, where the rest of the Scottish team will have a weekend off. They'll be training, and that's where it's not great. No, it'd be much better if they were. They'll be able to do it now. They'll have the money in the next 4 years, and they'll be able to keep the best players and pay them properly. But I accept your argument.
It's a shorter career span now, I guess, anyway. With
Yes.
The ferocious tackling,
Yes.
the fact that all the players are bulked up. I mean, it looks really scary stuff.
If you look round, in the old days, people played into their early 30s, their mid-30s. And now you see very few international players who've gone through 30. And if they have, they'll be 30 or 31. It's physically, the players are just bigger, stronger, heavier, faster, fitter, everything. And it's just smashing into each other non-stop. It's a brutal game.
More questions? Yes, somebody on the aisle there. And then if you could pass it down to that other gentleman.
Yeah. Can I take you back to your Aberdeen days? And
Yes.
As I recall, your first batch at Aberdeen University was in the second 15, before you were promoted by the rugby committee to first 15 status. But anyway, I was rather like to ask you about...
Did you play fly half?
No, I was actually in the back row.
Did you do all my tackling for me?
Probably.
Good.
I'd like to mention a number 7 you probably played with, and again, it's not me, who was pretty prevalent in those days, and I don't know if you played for the North and Midlands against the All Blacks at Linksfield Stadium around that time, when the great Colin Meads was around, but he didn't play that day. But the number 7 that played for the North and Midlands went on to play for Scotland and very well for Scotland. I wonder if
Nairn McEwen?
No, he was a bit tougher than Ian McEwen, I think. Ron Glasgow, if you want to say anything about it.
He was a mass murderer.
Right, just in there.
Yes.
Gentleman had to...
I played against him twice, once for the North and Midlands and once for Edinburgh, and he got as near to me as you are now. I was running backwards faster than he was running forwards.
Yeah, you were just talking earlier about what I'd almost describe as collision rugby that we've got now. Interested in your thoughts on the potential changes to the tackling laws that they're looking at now about not tackling above the waist.
Yeah, I'm not keen on that, because it's just everyone's tackled round the waist since 1888, and I think it's a difficult one to police. And yet, guys that height and guys that height. But I will happily go and watch the trials, and they'll spend a lot of time. They're doing it with. It's not even the main clubs, is it? Is it the championship clubs or under 20s?
Is it in France that they're looking at?
They're doing it in France and I think Ireland, but it's the real bad tackles are getting the neck and the head. If you hit somebody there, that's not the same punishment. But if you go down to the waist, and then if you're down there, it's easy for everybody to offload. So I would take a little bit of convincing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to school where we probably did just tackle round the waist more.
Yeah,
but,
yes.
Maybe it makes the game flow more, I don't know.
Oh, it would make the game flow quicker, yes.
More questions, please?
I've got one just down here.
Oh,
Somebody in the middle there, and is there somebody over there? Oh yes.
I've been challenged to ask this question by one of your ex-teammates. Do you think rugby union would improve if it took a lead from rugby league and only had 13 players on the side?
no. See, and the dog liked that. Hey, you see, he leapt up high five. Yeah. No. I think Rugby League struggles desperately. They have a World Cup, which Scotland feature in. There's not a single game, as far as I know, of Rugby League ever been played in Scotland or Ireland. It has in Wales, and it failed after 12 months. And yet they have teams. Funnily enough, they all speak with an Australian accent or a South Sea Island accent, but Scotland have been in the last 3 World Cups without a single Scottish player or anyone who's ever played Rugby League. Rugby League is struggling desperately now. There's no money. The last Rugby League World Cup, they went to the BBC to say, we'll let you have it for £8 million, and the BBC were not interested. They went to Sky, they went to BT Sport. In the end, they paid the BBC to £2 million to televise the Great Britain games and the final, and that was it. Now, if in a World Cup you can't have any interest from anyone in television, you know the sport is fading.
Right, we've got somebody got the mic in the middle there, thank you.
Ian, do you have any stories about your time with Watsonians?
That's fit to print.
No. I had a very happy time with Watsonians, and I'm trying to think of anything that was out of the usual. Oh, yes, we went on an Easter tour. Christmas tour. You're a Watsonian, I hope. Yes. So, yes. So we would go on a Christmas tour, and it wasn't very challenging. We just went down and played in 3 successive days, Newport, Cardiff, and Swansea. It's the sort of thing the All Blacks would never dream of doing it. But Watsonians and a few drinks. And we had to go on the train. We had to do something on the train that would be outrageous. And I won, because as we were pulling out of Waverley and the guy had his hat and the flag, I removed both. And then went down the whole length of the train. I put the flag there with it dripping down. I had the hat on and a navy blazer, and I collected all their tickets. In front of them, I went back into the corridor, opened and threw them out, said, "Thank you very much. You won't need them at the other end." But at the other end, they bloody did need them. And they said, "Oh, yeah, that's right, is it? Oh, a ticket collector, was it? And that." And he opened the window. And did he? You think we're going to believe that? Is that okay?
I have to say, the more I listen to you, the more I wonder why they call it football hooligans.
Yes. Oh, no damage was done. Not hooligans.
Yes, we've probably got time for one quick question. Who's got the mic? Here?
Gentleman here.
Thank you.
Can whisper.
Could you make it a quick... I was going to say, could you make it a quickie? Forget I said that.
No.
Who's willing?
Behave yourself.
I read last week the obituary for Sir Brian Lochore, who was considered
yes.
to be one of the, arguably the greatest captain of the greatest All Blacks team of all time in the 60s.
Yes.
His career in Colin Meads, who was also in that team, straddled the beginning of yours. I wondered if you had any particular stories or anecdotes about either of those two reprobates.
Yes, I was very lucky. I played against England, Ireland, Wales, France, Australia, and South Africa. I turned down the opportunity to face Colin Meads. Colin Meads was a great guy. He died a year ago, and Brian Lochore, they were great players, tough as nails. He trained Colin Meads with one sheep under one arm, one under the other, and he would run backwards up a hill. I mean, you wonder what they do for fun in New Zealand. But Meads was great, and Lochore, they were two of the greatest rugby players of all time. And Meads was the first, the second All Black, but the first in this country ever to be sent off when he kicked David Chisholm at Murrayfield in the back of the head as he was going past. And the referee was Kevin Kelleher from Ireland, and was the first player to be sent off in a game at Murrayfield. and the Scottish team went to the referee and begged them not to send Colin Meads off. They said it was an accident. And the referee said, I can't change my mind. But he was, and afterwards Meads said he was so grateful to the Scottish players for raising the fact they wanted him to stay on. But he was as tough. I mean, the story is legendary that the first time they met, Colin Meads and Willie John McBride, Meads smashed McBride. McBride said, oh, for goodness sake, and smashed him back. And then they looked at each other and said, right, shall we just call it quits? Yes. And they got on and played rugby for the next 32 times they met at international level. So, and Lochore was a great man too. I met them out last year, had dinner with, just down in Colin Meads's territory, I've forgotten, it's North Island, Midway. And we looked back at the world and said how rugby has changed dramatically, but it's still a great game. And they were just great, great guys.
That's a great note for us to end this particular bit on, Ian. But as I was saying, Ian is going to be in the signing tent, which is left here, and then the second door on the left where the cafeteria area is. The cafeteria is out front now. The signing tent is the inside bit. This book is just a joy. It's my habit when I'm doing these things to turn over pages where I think there might be something that I want to refer back to, and there's almost no page not turned over. It's full of wonderful anecdotes, and it's beautifully written, as you might imagine, from a journalist such as Ian. So please join me in thanking Ian Robertson.